Okay, I'm going to try to take you on this ride the best I can. We're going to need that in a minute here. Well, not exactly. But we'll be needing that in a minute here for a way to perceive a plane while you're in astrophysics. Yeah, well, astral planes right now. But before I get into that, let me talk about some reality for you. I don't want to just lose all you have on here. Let's start with another plane I think a lot of you are good with. The elemental planes. Well, some of you know dirt real good. Some of you know trees real good. But in the elemental space, you'll get things like the periodic table, and it works.
Today, you and I are going to get into
different.
divergence.
I couldn't find
and
one for planes and fields.
To make sure we're all on the same page, let's begin by talking
But
about
this
vector
plane
fields.
can help you move
Essentially,
20
a vector field is
spaces
what you get if you associate
based on
each
intelligence
point in space with a vector
for
some
what that
magnitude and
move
direction.
works. But you
Maybe
won't,
those vectors
you won't
represent
know
the
any of that
velocities
yet. It
of
just kind of
particles
gives you a
fluid
loose
that
lit
stroll
idea of the
this
last
in
place you've seen somebody
or maybe they
do
represent the
chemistry.
force of gravity at many different
and therefore
points
how
in
to
space.
remake the
Or maybe a
structure
magnetic
under
field
your own
space.
hand.
Quick note on
Let's
drawing
take a
these.
look at some of these
Often if you
symbols,
were to
shall
draw
we?
the vectors to scale,
The
longer
geometry
ones end up
on the
just cluttering
vectors.
up the whole thing. So it's common to basically lie a little and artificially
Sure, aren't
shorten
exactly
ones that are too
pure
long.
geometry, you know what I
Maybe using
mean?
color to give some vague sense
These
of
are
length.
pretty fast and loose
Now, in
and
principle,
hydrogen
vector
all
fields
over
in
the place,
physics
you know what I
might
mean? It's
change
hydrogen,
over
it's
time.
helium,
In
there's some
almost all
density
real-world fluid
differences,
flows,
0 to
the
1,
velocities of particles
stuff
might vary
happens.
space.
You're gonna go with the flow. And a lot of those astral projections. Think about it like a dream. You probably don't have a lot of control over it, right? Probably don't have a lot of control over the chemistry conversation or the physics conversation or the engineering conversation, do you? Because you don't understand that plane well enough for when they're breaking down briefs. You're just floating out in space, kind of going along with the flow, waiting for your brief to get cut off in there, and you don't really understand contextually the leadership conversational models on that for...
By imagining, what if it represented a different physical phenomenon?
Again, this being a magnetism type of note has strong forces and weak forces. Elements of different composition with magnetic fields fall at a different ratio. They still fall at 9.8 meters per second, but composition, densities, all kinds of those Ingling values, those Ingling angles,
What does it tell us about
give you a
the
better
original
spectrum under it.
These sorts of questions
So if you
can
know
be
electrical
surprisingly
engineering, you get the 9-volt dragon out of there, some Gauss, Maxwell, Faraday in the field that pops up. You know, when it comes to electrical engineering, they know the zero, plus they could get into the schematic works of what that plane, individually a piece of paper, might be able to describe me in detail in a clairvoyant model. Our problems are neutral. The result is of an answer. We got the system that is repetitive every day by the output, even if it's an erratic output.
The divergence of a vector field at a particular point of the plane.
I'm going to give you an official description of the astral plane coming from second edition, a magnificent way of seeing.
Like I said, we can get into here and we can change this up a bunch. You know, depending on which clique or which esoterics throughout history we might be dealing with here. You know, you want to get into Solomon's seals and how the geometry may not be correct. You could go through every page of this trying to chase down the brief, and maybe do some kids some good for certain time frames on it, but after you're out this age of it and chasing it down this long, you know, without a master going ronin into this, eventually you're going to see some of this stuff and not have any trade secrets for how that symbol mechanic works, but still the coin, the challenge, would remain the same. You know, you would speak the same language, you would be Doomslayer through it, you're not helping some brother, you know, that's going to be your coin when we go get this version of you're in the coffin or whatever. And I'd make my own. It'd only be natural that a lot of human CT paradox, short of you actually summoning something, matters. So you have to think about the demographic of the roster that's not using that, you know. So inside here I'm meditating, but I'm not meditating. Here it just might be at a very broad spectrum. I don't have anything in front of me, nor am I going through somebody's file cabinet like Lucy, you know what I mean, flipping cards on them, getting inside of there, trying to figure out what comes up in the flash, the glint. You'll find light, some of this stuff. Some of this stuff will find you light in the wrong kind of way because you'll have to deal with the fire. You'll find the boss on your ear. You'll deal with the husband and boyfriend, and it'll be your girlfriend or whatever it turns into by that standards. You know, sometimes you gotta look for space, you know, and that's where the light was hidden, in some way for you to find clairvoyance on planning things out, or what you wanted to do, or the direction you may wanted to. Where'd you go, buddy? There you go. Time is a big factor inside of here. You know, these are not things that just come easy to you. You know, you try to explain it to somebody. They're clocked in, it's one thing. It's like, as long as you keep clocking in, the rungs on the ladder will be there. Now, on the other hand, on these things, stock market, chemistry, you know, it's a simple understanding. It's, you know, these intelligent factors can make you run a lot farther on those index, which is not always a good thing. I'm not actually there to physically touch this stuff. You get into a lot of this with grandmasters and stuff, because from the desk you don't really have a choice but to run it from the astral plane. Right? You know, it's going to be moving a causal, here's blueprints and timelines on dollars and things like that. So not only is that a trip up factor in there, but first kids, you gotta build your way up to that. But inside of those values, when you're Mario master plumber out there, you got to be able to do that master. If you get out there with the hitchy bit on the astral plane, oh, do this, that, and the other, and then you take a step back down to master mason, and you got to explain these, get the tools, put them in there, hands behind the back, and make sure the process would look like I did it with their hands. And, you know, so whatever the task is, you know, psychology students, whatever value at the astral plane, we're saying, well, what's the spectrum of Dave with schizo? Let's look at the situational awareness. What does he normally do? Graph it. He works in a stone mill. What's the schizo on Jordan? Bipolar manic. He works in a stone mill from Hancock, and I'll start adding all those factors together in here and say, well, I'm going to make you do this. You know, there should be some maps around town, but they may not be exactly right to the scale, and there's no reason as if it was me doing me, let's astral plane this for a moment in a quanti time space for a moment and just say to me, well, what I would have to do is I'd go make the town maps, and I would go through those things, go through the job resumes, figure out which ones are the best criterion cut for you, or time compressed, which of those values is camped for equity at the timeline, how long you're going to be camped out there with a silver thread tied around your neck. Catch you on the next one.